think everyone's kind of trickled in, so we can get started, and people trickle in later, that's fine. Thank you so much for joining our session. I have some wonderful panel speakers beside me, but before I introduce them, just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Necole Morris. I'm a vice president with Spitfire Strategies. Spitfire Strategies is a strategic communications, PR, and marketing firm based in DC. We are woman-owned. We've been around for a little over 20 years, about 22 years. And the great thing about us is we focus our work on social justice, social purpose, all things social equity issues. So we have the great opportunity to work with leaders such as yourselves, leaders such as these panelists, on how we think about closing the gaps in communities. The social justice equity issues run the spectrum. So we have clients that are focused on voting right matters. We have clients that are focused on reproductive rights. We have clients focused on affordable housing. That's my space. I'll talk a little bit about my background there. We have clients in health equity space, you name it, structural racism. Our clients are focused on helping us help them bridge the gaps where the gaps need to be bridged the most. We built campaigns for them. We built narrative strategies for them. We help position their leaders so that, thank you. Sorry, can you guys hear me? Okay. We help position their thought leaders so that they can do the great work in the communities and be boots on the ground and think strategically about how they advocate for policy reform, to make sure that these issues are addressed. It's all work in progress and it's all collaborative. So today we want to focus our effort in this room on how you elevate the work that you're doing, how you use proven strategies in the communications stratosphere. We're going to talk a little bit about social media. We have a couple cool videos to show you. We have a table activity. We'll walk the room and we'll kind of help you navigate through that. But we really want you guys to come together and work together and network. This is not a formal session. We want you to engage with us. We don't want to just talk at you. We want to talk with you. So after each question, we'll leave it open for the audience to share perspective, to share thoughts and insights. That way we get you guys going and you're not saving those questions until the end and you possibly have forgotten them. A little bit about me. Again, I work with Spitfire Strategies. I came to DC by way of San Francisco. I'm a Howard alumna. Any Bisons in the room? Yeah? Okay. I always check. I wanted to focus my career on communications. San Francisco is a city that has rapidly gentrified. We've watched families and residents of color become displaced very quickly. And so immediately I knew I wanted my communications background to focus on how we think about serving communities and how we think about keeping families in place and not displaced when a city decides to burst economically. I came from Fannie Mae, so I did a lot of work around their sustainable communities effort and initiative. It caused the GSE to think outside the box and partner in a way that they had never done before with nonprofits that are actually closing the gaps in affordable housing. I also worked with the death of George Floyd around their racial commitment equity efforts. And so how, they took a stance on, they own 95% of the housing, single family and multifamily market. How do we reach families who have been put out, who have been excluded? How do we address the systemic inequities in housing that have caused redlining? This all ladders up to this conversation today, right? And how we reckon with our past to close the gaps in health, in education, in housing, and in all those things, voting rights and criminal justice. And so today, I am lucky to be joined with my great panelists here. I want to first introduce Jennifer Clancy. She's the founder and COO of Klowtify. Klowtify is a firm that elevates organizational leaders to tell their story and get it placed in the right medium, so it's heard and felt by the right people. Katrina Powell, she's beside me here. She's a professor and director of the Center for Refugee, Migrant, and Displacement Studies at Virginia Tech. Her research focuses on displacement research and meaningful action. Her recent book, Beginning Again, Stories of Movement and Migration in Appalachia, is an oral history collection about relocating to and within Appalachia. And last but not least, Karen Watson. She's a veteran communications and public policy expert, currently in the food and wellness space, with expansive experience in using market research and communication strategies to build consumer demand for new and existing products in the areas of health and wellness. So let's give them a hand. Okay, with that, we're going to jump right in. Again, please have your questions, your thoughts, opinions ready after each question, and let's talk. So you each have such expansive and unique backgrounds. Can you talk a little bit about how your experience helps address systemic inequities that have led to the divided country, and how you elevate solutions in policy and advocacy space to create change? And I think I want to, let's go to you first.
Sure. So my business partner and I founded Klowtify after being in the corporate world for decades. We have about 60 years of experience in media services combined, not just me alone. Thank you. And the reason we made the move to create our own company was because working in thought leadership, we realized just time and time again the disparities between who gets voice, who gets published, who gets heard, what missions are elevated, and of course the opposite side of that coin, who's not heard. And so it was critical to us to find a way to develop systems and processes that extended our media relationships and experience to those that don't always have the same opportunities as the dominant media culture. So that includes women, that includes people of color. And so we've dedicated our mission to ensuring that that voice is expanded into additional populations, because the opportunities of thought leadership and content amplification are vast. And we work in the nonprofit space primarily. So we work with companies that are in child welfare policy, disability rights. And so in order to ensure that those missions receive the visibility and awareness that are requisite of fundraising and reaching policymakers and all of the things that you're trying to accomplish in your communities with partnerships and stakeholders, you got to have access to, quality communication strategy and services. And so that's why we became a business. I think I want to answer the other two parts of your question too quickly around kind of the division in our country. It's been a very heavy week for news, as we all know. And I think the media plays a really big and important and impactful role in the way that that narrative is created and delivered across all of us in our living rooms, to our businesses, to the work that we're doing in our communities. So when there's a singular perspective that narrative is deriving from, there was a story in Word in Black back in February that talked about how Black media consumers are actually the biggest consumers of media globally. It was a really well-researched study. And the importance of that article was talking about how we need to make sure that the perspective that those media stories are coming from are better balanced. So I think there's a big opportunity there, and we're excited to help bridge that gap. And we do that by creating access through affordability. So sometimes media services are out of reach for nonprofits, and you try to cobble together a strategy and a team internally, and a lot of people are wearing a lot of different hats. And so we wanted to kind of bring some of that elite quality to the nonprofit space and make that more affordable for everyone to be able to access and utilize within achieving your missions goals. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Katie Powell, and I'm an English professor, and I'm also the director of the Center for Refugee, Migrant, and Displacement Studies. And my research area is in displacement narrative, so I'm interested in the ways that people tell stories about their displacement experiences. And this all began when I did a project about Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. And I grew up in that area right at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and so I've never not known the story of displacement of that area. It's always been in my consciousness. My parents made us hike there every weekend, and so I've just always known that story. And as I got older and started reading about the representations of people who had lived there, who were forcibly displaced, it was always confusing to me why those stories did not match the stories I knew from the people who had lived there, and also didn't tell the complete story of the American Indian tribes who had lived there even before the white settlers had lived there. So my research on displacement narrative began with that project and then expanded to multiple kinds of displacement. While I was writing the book on that project, Hurricane Katrina was happening, and I was a professor at LSU, and some families who were displaced came to Baton Rouge, where I lived, and then also at the same time, the war in Sudan was happening, and I was hearing stories about displacement from multiple kinds of displacement, and those stories often intersected and overlapped, even though there was quite a difference in time period, quite a difference in region, culture, and then type of displacement, natural disaster versus eminent domain versus civil unrest or government-induced development. And so that's where all that research began. And so at the center at Virginia Tech, which I should mention, Virginia Tech is a land-grant university, and so its very founding is based on displacement. And there's been a lot of movement across the country of all colleges and universities, but particularly land grants, to try to recognize the lands that we work on. And in my particular case, it's the Monacan and Tutelo peoples whose land Virginia Tech sits on. And so some colleagues and I are very interested in the ways that the work that we're doing in terms of storytelling and narrative might have some impact on the kinds of policies that are made about people who are displaced. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you all how in a natural disaster, for instance, who gets access to particular kinds of aid is not equal. And so while Hurricane Katrina itself maybe wasn't discriminatory, it's the policies in place, where people live, the kinds of resources they had even before the hurricane and then after are at odds with who is able to recover after a situation like that. And so the most recent project that you mentioned that just got published is a book of oral histories that I did. So it's published in a book, but it also began as little individual narratives. And so in thinking about, and this came up in the session earlier today, about data and what kinds of data do we have. When you ask someone for their story, that of course is a gift from them to give you their story, and there's a lot of ethics involved in interviewing someone. But one way to have a reciprocal relationship is to produce these four folks, and then it turns into a book like this. This has gotten a little bit of attention recently because it's in fact a response to J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy of being so full of stereotypes. And what this book does is try to put together a diverse set of narratives about Appalachia that are try to tell more of the complexity of the history of Appalachia and the stories of movement and migration in Appalachia. And I mention these because of taking stories are data, and how we then translate someone's individual lived experience into a data point that can be reported back in whatever form that our comms folks help us with, can then hopefully help a policymaker or a decision maker make the kinds of decisions that would lead us toward equity.
Hi, my name is Karen Watson. Good morning. I've had a lot of different experiences in multiple sectors: public, private, corporate, nonprofit. And my last full job was corporate, working for the world's largest market research firm. And I came to have a very different feeling about what really is important in terms of messaging and making an impact on messaging. And that is that as much as we talk about public policy communications and news and what really creates norms, something that's very influential on norms is popular culture. And so I want you to begin thinking about the popular culture in your location. And I want to give you an example of, in terms of especially health equity, but also social justice and empowerment and Black women's empowerment, what we're up against in terms of the media that we consume every minute of every day. So I brought a couple videos. One is, it's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. It's a film that was streamed on Netflix all over the world. Tens of millions of people saw it. And I just want you to get a sense of the kinds of messages that you may not think of as messages that are embedded in, and they're called advertising.